안녕하세요. 저도 한국어를 좀 하는데 저한테는 꼭 영어로 스피치를 하라고 해서 영어로 하겠습니다. 죄송합니다. Um, Good evening, everybody. My name is Hooney Kim, and I'm so happy that I get to speak to you in English because my Korean's not that good. Um, a little about myself. I own two Korean restaurants here in New York City. And I was born in Korea, but I left Korea when I was 3 years old. I lived in England and New York most of my life. I never really grew up eating Korean food too much because my mother was busy working, as most parents were my age. So I had no desire to be a chef. I had no connection with food until I was old enough that my mother gave me money to go out to eat. And what a beautiful city to live in when you can buy food. So I got to experience so much the wonderful restaurants in New York City. But growing up, I was the typical Asian student where I was very good at math, I was very good at science. I went to Bronx Science. My mother was happy about that. I ended up actually going to California, University of California at Berkeley, for college, undergraduate. And then, while I was at college, I still had no passion or desire. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I know there are college students here who have picked majors, not because they wanted to become something, but because they were good at it. And that was me. I continued with science because I was good at it. When I was about to graduate, and I still could not find a job that I wanted to apply to. So I decided to go to medical school to make my mother more proud. And when I went to medical school, it is where I learned that I hate hospitals. I wanted to sort of be a doctor, not just because my mother wanted me to be a successful person, which meant being a lawyer or a doctor or nothing, right? But I wanted to help people. I thought that was an important thing in choosing a career. But man, a hospital is a very depressing place. I was receiving so much negative energy from not just the patients, but the family of the patients, which I understood, but I hated being in a hospital. So much that I took a year off, a 1 year sabbatical, to rest, to rejuvenate. And in that 1 year, I ended up going to FCI, which is the French Culinary Institute. I wanted to sort of cook to get rid of some of the stress. I started liking the cooking. And while I was at FCI, which was only 3 days a week in Soho, they made me intern at these restaurants. And I still remember my first dish that I plated that somebody actually paid good money for. It was, and I'm sure a lot of cooks remember their first dish that they made, that they sold. It was thrilling. It was electric. And that's when I decided maybe, even though I'm Korean, even though I have Korean parents where becoming a chef is such shameful, it's almost like being a construction worker, maybe this is something that makes me happy. So I worked hard. I ended up applying to a restaurant that was, at that time, one of the best, still is, Daniel. It's a French restaurant, my mother's favorite restaurant. And I was accepted, and that's when I had to decide, going back to medical school, I had 1 year left, to become a doctor or continue cooking. If I was a brave soul, I would have stood up to my family and my friends and said, this does not make me happy. I want to be a chef. but I wasn't. So I took another year sabbatical. I took another year off because I couldn't convince people. Well, no, I couldn't convince myself if this is what I really wanted to do, to give up all that education, all those loans that I had, and to just give it up. But working at Danielle, that it just proved it proved to me that, when you look at doctors and they look more 멋있어, I mean, the chefs, they look more 멋있어 than the doctors you worked for. It makes a difference. I wanted to be more like the chefs at Danielle than the doctors and the professors at my medical school. And that is why, that is what gave me the strength to give up, ultimately, medical school and to become a doctor. And I was a very good cook at Danielle, cooking French food. But as good as a cook I was, there was something missing. And I worked a couple of years at Danielle, and then afterwards I went and learned how to cook Japanese food at Masa, which is then and still now the most expensive restaurant in the city. And learning Japanese food, looking at the Japanese cooks cook Japanese food, I felt something missing. Same as looking back, French cooks cooking French food, Japanese cooks cooking Japanese food. There's a sense of pride. I didn't have it. I was a better cook than all of them, but I wasn't cooking with pride, and I was jealous. I wanted to feel like an Olympic athlete, representing my culture, my country, my heritage. But I couldn't, because at that time, and this was 15, 16 years ago, there were Korean restaurants, but there were no Korean chefs. All Korean restaurants were businesses. And the difference basically is, I think, when you're a chef owner and you own a restaurant, it's less about money, it's less about profits. It's more about the ingredients, it's more about how a chef shows themselves through food. And that's sort of the lineage that I wanted to continue. So it was when when there was an opportunity for me to open up my own restaurant. I had never cooked Korean food before. I didn't really know the language very well. But I did remember the best food that I've ever had was when I was very young, going to Korea to visit my grandmother's house, where she had a backyard where she grew her own vegetables. She raised chickens and pigs. She had her own rice paddy, where she, gathered the rice. Every winter, she made kimchi, kimjang, for the entire year. And her house, the house business was growing, well, not growing, but kim. So they were drying kim in their front yard every day, cooking in an outdoor kitchen with oak wood. So when I think of Korean food, I think of cooking with nature. It's such an antithesis of where Korean food is now, where everything is processed, even our doenjang is processed. My image of Korean food was just, cooking with nature, enjoying nature, hearing when fire burns in a firewood oven, you could tuck, tuck, tuck. That still makes me hungry. And I feel that, the more I learned about Korean food, the more it is about nature, the more it is about not just healthy ingredients, but Koreans believe that we are born with the power to fight off any disease. But we need to make sure that our body is healthy enough to have or to retain that power to fight off these diseases. And that comes from the food that we eat. And anything man-made, whether it be preservatives, MSG, injection of antibiotics, injection of growth hormones in the animals that we eat, all of that is killing our body little by little. I know you guys in your 20s, it's just as me, we ate that every day. And your body is fine. But I know the little older generation here, 30s, 40s, later it affects you. And that is almost every single person. So the one thing that I wanted to sort of relate to you guys is it is never too early or never too late to start eating food that has less chemicals. And I talk about all of this natural food with Korean restaurant. It's because I think a lot of the Korean generation, especially the cooks, don't realize how special Korean food is, and how when we really study Korean food, it is exactly like studying nature. We make kimchi now to eat for the entire year. It is the definition of slow food. It is the definition of nature. We allow nature to ferment. We don't use preservatives. We shouldn't, because the foundation of our food is fermentation, which is natural preservation. I think a lot of Koreans, even who live in Korea, forget this. And I would like to know that we have such a hard time finding Korean cooks who want to cook Korean food. I have 2 restaurants, 6 and 9 years old, and every time I want to hire a chef, it takes me a year's commitment at least. I need to train somebody, convince them Korean food is special because of the ingredients, because of the flavors, because of the complexity and everything. And it takes me a year to train them into being a chef, because the Korean kids who already know this want to cook French food because they're a little embarrassed to be cooking Korean food. It's a problem that we have as restaurant owners. It's a problem that I don't know the answer to. The only way I promote it is we have a program at one of my restaurants, 한잔. After 9 p.m., all students with a college ID eat for 30% off. And I specifically recruited CIA students and FCI students, but NYU students are welcome too. And we do this because, you know, the food that I cook is a little bit more expensive. Organic ingredients are expensive. 된장, 고추장, 고춧가루, 참기름, and one more. 5 ingredients I specifically bring from Korea. $25,000 I spent last year just on shipping fees because I use Korean Air. But, you know, it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. And that is the food that I am proud to be cooking. That is the food that when I cook, it makes me feel like an Olympic athlete. It is this pride that I want to share with not just other Korean cooks, but with all cooks. Because, you know, even if we're not cooking food from our ethnicity, there is this pride when we put out a good product. But if you're Korean and cooking really good Korean food, there's this extra pride. There's that special pride. And that is something that we, as restaurant owners, really need to start promoting, because we need the younger Korean cooks to be proud to be Korean and proud of our food, to start cooking Korean food. Thank you very much.